I had a beautiful love story in the heart of New York, and I was certain that nothing could ever break my marriage. But one night, everything changed. An anonymous letter, a hidden truth, and the face of the woman I loved turned into a mystery. What I discovered next didn't just destroy my marriage. It forced me to face the cruelest question of all. What's left of us when trust is gone? My name is William. I'm 35, and Olivia had been my wife for 5 years. We met one autumn night in a bar on Lexington Avenue, surrounded by neon lights and laughter, and everything seemed easy. Too easy. Olivia worked in fashion, often stuck in endless Manhattan meetings. I ran a small photo studio, juggling clients and retouching. Our life felt comfortable, built on routine: yellow cabs, quick dinners, foggy mornings in Brooklyn. The signs were subtle at first: a deleted message, a late arrival, a sentence that stopped halfway. I could feel a tension, like a wrong note in a familiar melody. Each time I asked, Olivia answered with a smile and perfectly timed silences. Those silences hurt more than any argument ever could. One April night, the city trembled under an unexpected summer storm, raindrops beating against the windows like drums. Olivia had promised to come home early. She didn't. I waited, watching the car lights on Fifth Avenue, imagining 1,000 scenarios. At midnight, a text appeared on my phone, not from Olivia, but from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on the corner." I got into a cab and crossed Manhattan in silence, gripping the seat as if it could hold my world together. The cafe was small, bright, despite the rain, on a side street that smelled of wet paper and ground coffee. A woman approached me outside. She looked tired but determined, holding an envelope in her hand. "This is for you," she said firmly, then disappeared into the night. Inside, the pages shook between my fingers. Photos, emails, screenshots Olivia might have sent, or not. I couldn't read at first. I felt dizzy, as if the cafe floor had shifted. The images showed Olivia, but in moments that didn't belong to me. Faces I didn't know, places I had never seen. My hands trembled, but I kept reading, drawn by a force stronger than reason. The next day, I went back home and searched through our messages, bank records, and hidden photo folders. I tried to piece it all together, a puzzle with missing pieces ripped out on purpose. Every discovery hit like a punch: a hotel booking in Brooklyn when she was working late, deleted calls, strange money transfers. I wondered how long it had been going on, and why I was the last to know. I confronted Olivia, gently at first, then with a rage I had never felt before. She avoided my eyes, swallowed a lie that tasted bitter, and finally gave in, not to my accusations, but to the exhaustion of keeping her truth caged. "William, she began, her words sliding like oil over fire. Her voice trembled, her hand reached for mine, but I pulled away. She confessed what I feared: another presence in her life, an affair that began with harmless texts and turned into secret meetings. It felt like being punched in the chest, the air gone, the city distant. The details were sharp as glass: street names, late cafes in Chelsea, an apartment rented for nights I didn't know existed. With each revelation, my world tilted further out of place. I left, unable to stay in that apartment now haunted by ghosts. The New York night wrapped around me, the lights of taxis and billboards seemed cruelly bright. I walked aimlessly, passing the Brooklyn Bridge, feeling the cold soak through my shirt. Strangers brushed past me, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. In the following days, I started my own investigation. I took photos, watched addresses, talked to cafe servers as if I were a detective. I wrote everything down in a small notebook: times, license plates, descriptions. Sometimes I imagined conversations she might never have had, inventing proof just to feed my resentment. But each note anchored me to a bitter reality I couldn't escape. One morning, an anonymous letter appeared under our door, slipped between the mat and the frame like a snake. Inside was a single line: "It's not what you think." The handwriting was elegant, confident. I wanted to tear it up, burn it, but I kept it, tucked in my notebook as a possible clue, or maybe a taunt. I drove to Chelsea, knocked on several doors, questioned strangers in nearby cafes. The answers were vague, closed faces, shrugged shoulders. But at the back of a dim bar, a waiter gave me a name I wasn't expecting. Jason. It was an ordinary name, but to me it became the key to a lock I didn't yet know how to open. When I found Jason's apartment, I felt an invisible hand pushing me forward. His mailbox had a jazz club sticker and a plastic snowflake. The building smelled of fresh paint. I waited outside until a figure appeared, a man in his 50s, calm, who looked like he belonged to every corner of that street. I watched him smoke, anger rising in me like molten metal. I approached, my questions tangled with my breath. "Do you know Olivia?" I asked. He smiled, a strange smile, not guilty, but heavy with regret. "Maybe," he replied, as if playing a part he already knew too well. His answer left me hanging between rage and the desperate need to know. What I learned afterward wasn't simple or clean. Jason liked quiet evenings. He worked late at the docks and carried secrets like folded letters in his pocket. He admitted to meetings, shared coffees, and promises whispered under dim streetlights. But he also spoke of a deeper story, one where Olivia wasn't just a lover, but someone searching for something she refused to name. I listened silently, every word landing like a verdict I wasn't ready to accept. Sometimes, truth has layers that even anger can't pierce. Jason handed me his own notebook, filled with notes that offered no comfort. I flipped through the pages like old photographs, nostalgia, regret, unfinished sentences. That night, I returned to our apartment and found Olivia asleep on the couch, her hair messy as if she'd fought a storm and lost. I watched her breathing, calm and rhythmic, and felt an unexpected wave of compassion. The war between hate and love is a minefield. Both sides wound you. I sat beside her, not waking her, knowing that the days ahead would demand impossible choices. I wanted to understand, not punish. I decided to listen to her story when she was ready, not force the truth out of her. The next morning we had coffee together, silent at first, then with awkward words. Olivia said she needed to explain, not to defend herself, but to be free. She spoke of an emptiness I hadn't seen, hollow hours after photo shoots, doubts that ate away at her work and choices. She talked about freedom as something both beautiful and dangerous. She admitted the meetings, yes, but said some things went beyond betrayal. They touched old wounds I had ignored. Her voice shook, and I realized her pain wasn't only about me. For a moment I wanted to run again, to let the city swallow my confusion, but something held me back. The thought that we had built something, however fragile. I wasn't sure I could forgive or forget, but I needed to listen. As Olivia spoke, I mentally noted every detail, every word that could explain what had broken. Then she mentioned a name I didn't expect, Marcus. Not Jason, not some cinematic lover. Marcus was a co-worker, a man with problems seeking comfort in Olivia's attention. She hadn't been chasing love, only escape, a temporary refuge. The revelation didn't bring relief. It made everything more human, more painfully complex. The city kept breathing, indifferent to our cracks. Sirens wailed in the distance, a taxi honked, and life carried on as if nothing had happened. But inside me, something had shifted. The illusion that I could fix everything had vanished. I realized the road ahead would be long, filled with questions, small victories, and bursts of anger. That first chapter of my broken life ended with a decision. I wouldn't walk away in haste. I closed the apartment door, grabbed my notebook, and chose to learn before judging. The city around us kept moving, its cafes, its buildings, its restless people. But to me, it would never look the same again. I felt the next part of my story waiting, and I knew it would change everything. The days that followed, I left the apartment for a while. I found refuge in a small hotel near Central Park, where the heavy curtains filtered the morning light and the city's noise felt far away. I spent my days walking without direction, watching joggers, families, and hot dog vendors. Loneliness became my companion, and in its silence, I finally heard the real sound of my anger. Every morning I went down to the cafe in the lobby, a tiny place run by a Cuban couple. The woman served me a latte without asking questions, and I was grateful for her quiet kindness. I had stopped checking my phone, but sometimes, out of habit, my fingers searched for Olivia's name in my contacts. The emptiness she left behind wasn't just the absence of a woman. It was the hollow space of a life I no longer recognized. One night, as I reread the notes in my journal, I realized I couldn't live in that fog forever. I needed the truth, even if it hurt. I decided to meet Marcus. Not to fight, not to hate him, but to understand what he truly meant in all of this. Sometimes peace begins with confrontation. Finding Marcus wasn't hard. New York is vast, but social media makes distances disappear. He worked in a design studio in Soho, a stylish place with glass walls, green plants, and giant screens. I showed up on a rainy morning wearing a dark coat and a fragile certainty. My heart was racing, but my steps were steady. He recognized me before I spoke. "William, I assume?" he said calmly, almost resigned. His voice carried no arrogance, no fear. He offered me a coffee, and we sat near the large window overlooking Green Street. The sound of rain against the sidewalk filled the silence. Two men talking about love in an open space. It was absurd, yet strangely human. "I don't want drama," he said. "What happened should never have happened." His words fell like stones into water, spreading quiet ripples in my chest. I listened as he told his side, how Olivia had spoken of her loneliness, her emptiness. He didn't pursue her, he said. She had come to him, searching for something she no longer found with me. Attention. I didn't know if I could believe him. Everything about him seemed honest, and yet each word reopened my wounds. "You knew she was married," I whispered. He nodded, lowering his eyes. "Yes, and I still hate myself for it." He looked guilty but not cynical. In that moment, I understood that betrayal isn't black or white. It's gray, human, built from mistakes and weakness. When I left the studio, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet pavement and fresh coffee from the Soho streets. I looked up at the skyscrapers and felt a strange lightness. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but the first step towards something less painful. Sometimes you have to face your enemies to find what you've lost in yourself. I reached out to Olivia a few days later. She suggested meeting at a restaurant on 9th Avenue, a place we used to love. The decor hadn't changed, dim lights, soft jazz music, the same waiter who still remembered our favorite dishes. But this time, the table between us felt too wide. I didn't know how to begin. She watched me quietly before speaking. "You don't trust me anymore, do you?" I shrugged. "I don't know. I don't trust much of anything anymore." She lowered her eyes, then reached across the table to touch my hand. "I want to fix this, William, not to save what we were, but to finally be honest." Her tone disarmed me. I saw something real in her eyes, something tired, stripped of pretense. She explained how she'd lost herself in a spiral of work, loneliness, and lies repeated until they became truth. I hurt you, yes, but I didn't do it to destroy you. I was empty, William, and you were somewhere else. Her words cut deep because part of them were true. I took a deep breath, watching the people outside through the rain-streaked window, their hurried faces under umbrellas. Everyone carried their own secrets, their own ruins. Maybe we got lost together, Olivia, I whispered. She nodded, and a tear slid down her cheek. I didn't know whether to comfort her or let her face the weight of her guilt alone. That night, I slept at home for the first time in weeks. The bed felt foreign, but the familiar smell of clean sheets gave me a fragile peace. Olivia slept in the guest room. The silence between us wasn't a wall anymore. It was a fragile bridge we were trying to rebuild. I caught myself hoping, not for a return, but for a rebirth. In the following weeks, we started to talk calmly again, not about what happened, but about what remained. The wounds were slowly closing, like scars you learn not to touch. We took walks through Central Park with no agenda, just to breathe the same air. I rediscovered the city, and through it, a version of myself I thought I had lost. Sometimes at night, I woke in panic, afraid everything was repeating itself, the sound of a message alert, a shadow in the hallway, and my heart would race. Trauma doesn't disappear. It just sleeps somewhere deep inside you. But each morning, when sunlight crossed the curtains, I told myself survival was already a kind of love. One Sunday morning, Olivia handed me a letter. "Read it when you're ready," she said softly. I opened it hours later in a Brooklyn cafe. She wrote about forgiveness, not the kind you beg for, but the kind you give yourself. "If you choose not to love me anymore, I'll understand," she wrote. "But please remember, what we once had was real, and that's what saved me." I closed the letter and watched the city come alive around me. Yellow taxis, street vendors shouting, steam rising from the manholes. Everything looked the same, and yet everything had changed. I hadn't decided whether to stay or leave, but for the first time in months I felt no anger, only a fragile peace, like calm after a storm. That evening I called Olivia, not to talk about the past, but the present. We walked across the Brooklyn Bridge, the wind tangling her hair. She smiled shyly, almost like a child. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. And in that moment, I understood. Some stories don't end with a period, but with a breath. Maybe forgiveness isn't about erasing. It's about learning to live with what remains. Scars aren't reminders of pain. They're reminders of survival. And in this enormous city full of broken people and flickering lights, I finally found my place again. Not as a wounded husband, but as a man learning how to rebuild. Night stretched over New York, the lights reflecting on the East River, and I realized everything was beginning again. Not like before, not with the same promises, but with the certainty that even in chaos, life always offers a second chance. Autumn settled over New York like a heavy blanket. Golden leaves covered the sidewalks, and shop windows began to fill with Halloween decorations. Life went on around me, indifferent to my doubts. Olivia and I shared the same space again, but something hung between us, a shadow that no word could lift. In the mornings, I watched her making coffee, her hair tied back, her eyes still tired. Sometimes she smiled shyly, as if afraid to exist in my light. I didn't know how to act around her. Should I forgive or just accept what had broken? Every ordinary gesture became a silent test of the trust trying to grow again. One evening, as I finished a photo shoot in Brooklyn, she called me. Her voice trembled, barely noticeable. "Can you come home? I have something to show you. I came back under a light rain, my hands cold, my heart uneasy. When I opened the door, she was sitting in the living room, eyes red, a folder on the table. Beside it lay a sealed letter with my name on it. "This is the truth, all of it," she said quietly. "I want you to know what I never had the courage to say." I hesitated before opening it. With every line, my hands shook. She wrote not only about the affair, but about her fears, fear of aging, of being invisible, of loneliness I had never seen. Her words were raw, honest, painful. For the first time, I read Olivia without disguise. I closed the letter slowly. She watched me, waiting for a sentence that would decide her fate. I took a deep breath, letting silence fill the room. "Thank you," I finally said. It was all I could offer, not forgiveness, not yet, but the recognition of her truth, no matter how much it hurt. Sometimes, thank you is the first step toward peace. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked up to the rooftop and stared at the city below. The skyscrapers pulsed like living hearts. I thought about everything we had built, everything we had destroyed, and what might still be possible. In the cold Manhattan air, I understood that true courage isn't about leaving or staying. It's about choosing with clarity. The next morning, I made 2 coffees and joined her on the balcony. Her eyes were tired, but clearer than ever. "I need to know, William. Are we continuing?" she asked. I stayed silent for a long moment, then said, "Not like before. If we continue, it has to be different. No more appearances, no more running away. Just truth, even when it hurts." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. We decided to start over slowly, like 2 strangers learning each other from scratch. Walks through West Village, coffee shared without expectation. Sometimes a word or a glance reopened the pain, but instead of hiding it, we talked. I learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to stay, even with the cracks. One winter night, we walked along the High Line, the city lights glowing under falling snow. Olivia slipped her hand into mine, and for the first time in months, I didn't pull away. The past wasn't erased, but it wasn't a prison anymore. Under New York's freezing wind, I realized forgiveness doesn't erase, and it transforms. Months passed. I began to love photography again. Sunsets over the Brooklyn Bridge, anonymous faces on the subway, brief moments that felt alive. Olivia found her balance too, her smile returning little by little. We no longer spoke about what happened, not out of denial, but out of respect for what we were rebuilding. Our love wasn't perfect, but it was real. One spring morning, she joined me at my studio, a cup of coffee in hand. "You know," she said, looking at me through the soft light, "I've learned something." "What's that?" I asked. She smiled. "That fidelity isn't just toward someone else, it's toward yourself." Her words hit me deeply. She was right. Sometimes we don't betray love. We betray the person we become. I took a picture of her that day, without posing or makeup, just her, with her scars, her light, her flaws. When I developed the photo, I understood why I couldn't hate her. She was part of my life, even through the fractures. Maybe beauty exists exactly where things once broke. A few weeks later, we left Manhattan for a few days by the sea, in a small house near Cape Cod. The wind was softer there, the silences lighter. We spoke little, but our eyes said enough. It was a truce, not an erasure, a pause to breathe, to remember that despite everything, we were still standing. On our last evening, we walked along the beach. The sky was violet, the waves dying quietly at our feet. Olivia turned to me. "Do you think we really have a chance?" she asked. I looked at her for a long time before replying. I don't know, but we make our chance day by day. As long as we're honest, anything's possible. She smiled, and for the first time, my words felt true. That night, I didn't try to forget. I simply accepted. The wounds, the mistakes, the absences, they were all part of the road. And if fate ever separated us again, I knew I would leave in peace, without hatred, without bitterness. Because loving someone also means learning how to let them go. Even now, when I walk through Times Square or hear a song we once loved, the echo returns. Not pain, not bitter nostalgia, just memory. The memory of a human story, imperfect but profoundly real. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing: I survived the storm. And in the reflection of New York's neon lights, I finally found myself again.